Welcome to episode 107 of the Camerosity Podcast, the world's one and only open source film and digital photography podcast. My name is Mike Ekman, and we are back at our normal time for more of your favorite camera discussion. In the last episode, we changed time zones and recorded at a time more friendly to our listeners in Europe and other areas of the world where it's normally the middle of the night at our usual time. In total, we had over 20 callers, several from the UK, Germany, Ireland, and our first ever caller from Norway. We wish we could do these more often as we love having as many people come on and talk to us. For tonight's episode, we have a very special guest, someone who I've been eager to get on the show for quite some time. He's one of the people who, if you collect cameras, it's almost guaranteed you've heard his name or visit his website or his YouTube channel for detailed information about the Kodak Retina and the Retina family of cameras. You know I can only be talking about Mr. Chris Sherlock. Hey there, Chris. It's lunchtime Tuesday for you, right?
Certainly is, but I've had lunch early, which is just as well because it's only 12 now.
All right. Well, welcome to the show. We're excited to get started. For the second episode in the row, we have all 5 Camerosity hosts, plus a whole waiting room full of people to invite in. So let's get going and hit that admit all button.
And for a nice change, I'm not the one first in the future.
13 people in the waiting room.
Holy smokes.
All right. We have AJ, Doug Willoughby, Fernando from Germany, Norris Liu, Pat Casey, Bob Rotoloni, Joao Gomes, Ben Ryerson, Greg Harp, Jeff Bennett, Mark Faulkner, haven't seen you in quite a while, Michael Boudreaux, Will Pinkham, and as always, the Zoom list constantly keeps moving around, so if I skipped your name, I do apologize. Ben Ryerson, I don't know if I said that name. But we have, as promised, we have Chris Sherlock here. Chris is in New Zealand, and Theo just pointed out that for the first time in a long time, he's not the person furthest ahead in the future because New Zealand is 2 hours ahead of even Sydney. So welcome everybody to the show. I know we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the Retina, but as we're recording this, for those of you not on the show now and hearing this later, we're in the middle of the Artemis moon mission is going on. It just came out of radio silence, and I think the solar eclipse is about to start. So really fascinating things going on as we're recording. But of course, you know, the show must go on. But I wanted to really quickly have Anthony to have a chance to share with us a story of he took some pictures of the launch using a pretty cool camera to do it. And even though he did post the pictures in the group for anyone who hasn't heard this, Anthony, why don't you tell us what you used to shoot the launch with?
Sure. When I was trying to determine what I wanted to shoot this particular launch with, and I'm lucky in that I've been going to these launches since I was like 7 years old, and my parents dragged me to see Saturn 13 launch. So I've seen Saturn launches, I've seen shuttle launches, I've seen the Atlas launches, SpaceX launches, the Falcon Heavy, but I've also shot the first Artemis launch. And so for this one, I wanted to do something special. So I looked back over my collection and thought, what do I have that dates back to the start of NASA? So I selected a 1962 Voigtlander Bessematic Deluxe, which was made in 1962, the same year that John Glenn made his first Mercury circumnavigation of the globe. First lunar Earth orbit by an American. And I happen to have this crazy Voigtlander Super Dynarex 350 millimeter lens, which, I always figured it was like designed for, Cold War spy espionage because it has like a minimum focal distance of 90 feet and you can still do critical focus at a mile. So I put it on infinity. They control the access to the surrounding areas around Kennedy Space Center for the Artemis launches more than they do for any other launches. And so I have a place where I would typically go called Playa Linda Beach on the Canaveral National Seashore, but unfortunately it's directly under the flight path. And with a rocket this big, they just didn't want to risk it. So they actually shut us off about 4 miles from Playa Linda up in the Canaveral National Seashore in the Merritt Island Wildlife Refuge. So I was about 6 miles from the launch pad. I was also caught out by surprise because they sent it off of a different launch pad than they sent Artemis 1. So I was about 25 degrees off and my setup with my tripod. I swear that Bessematic Deluxe and that Dynarex lens probably weigh 8 pounds when they're assembled together. So I had it on the tripod. I can hear people roaring because they're seeing it launch. And I'm looking around through my camera. I don't see anything. Whip it around, fire off 4 shots with the Bessamatic, switch out to a Voigtlander Bessa 2 because I thought it was a bit of I might as well take some medium format shots. So I was shooting Tri-X and the Bessamatic, and I got 2 shots off in that, which is you have to stop and look and roll the film and look at the red window to advance the film. So that was slowing me down. Reeled off 6 or 7 shots with the Pentax K1 digital camera, and then went back to the Bessamatic. And by that point, which it couldn't have been 45 seconds after launch, that rocket's moving so fast that it was already just moving horizontally across the horizon. And you can see the incredible exhaust from it, but you can no longer see the rocket itself, even with that crazy zoom or telephoto. But I did get some shots. I was really happy. I posted some to the group. I'll put some up on the Instagram page. And boy, it was the talk of the viewing platform that I was the only person there shooting film. They thought I was crazy, especially when I pulled out and unfolded the Bessa 2. I looked like a total crank shooting that camera. And I've got 2 exposures left on that roll, so I still haven't developed it. But if you get a chance to shoot one of these launches, it's truly amazing. I mean that you can get close enough that you actually just like feel it deep in your chest before you can hear it, and it's blindingly bright as it goes up. So exposure is difficult. You can either if you expose for the rocket exhaust, you're going to be too dark on everything else, and if you expose to be able to see the main rocket, you're going to blow out all your highlights. But I did the best I could and had some. I mean, I'm pretty happy with what we got, but it gives you a sense for being that close and seeing one of those rockets launch. It's really it sort of gives you a bit of joy at a time and a belief in science when things can be a little dark at the moment. So everybody there was really enthusiastic, and yeah, it was good. It was very good.
Yeah, the pictures you got were amazing, and it's just fantastic what you're able to do. And I mean, even though 6 miles is far, it's close for a rocket. So
It
well
is.
done. While you were talking, Eric Schneck commented that he was able to see the rocket trails from launches at the NASA facility at Wallops Island, Virginia.
Wow.
And Fernando asked which rocket made the biggest noise or feel in the chest.
Oh, the Saturn V, man, when that thing went off, it was insane. I mean, I was just a kid, I was
Yeah.
like 7 years old, and maybe it's because of that. Also, the shuttle launches were incredibly loud. This thing's moving so fast that it doesn't quite have quite the same impact. I mean, it is still incredibly loud, but it's like such a deep, low frequency noise that you feel it more than you hear it.
Well, very cool. I wanted to, because I was worried if we didn't do this at the beginning, we wouldn't have time at the end. So I wanted to get that up there. I thought it was timely considering they're still up there now. I
Sure,
believe the solar eclipse that they're seeing, not us, should be going on right now or just about to start. So they got 2 more hours, or maybe 1 more hour of lunar observation before they start making their 2-day trek back. So, all right. Well, thank you for that shared
sure.
story. Chris Sherlock, the man of the hour. Chris, you and I spoke 6 years ago, I think it was. I did before the podcast even existed. You and I had a call. I don't even think Zoom was a thing yet then.
No, it's probably Skype or something, I would imagine.
Something, yeah, I think that's what we did, and we kind of just had a chat. So I feel like I kind of maybe know some of your backstory, but we have a lot of listeners to the show who would never have read that article that are new to us since then. So I think a great place to start. I mean, everybody knows who you are, and I promised Chris I would make this clear multiple times throughout the show. Chris is not coming out of retirement. He did, stop taking in work couple years ago. You still get requests from people asking you if you repair
Yeah,
cameras?
certainly did. Had fresh one this morning.
So daily, almost?
Oh, yeah, about 3 times a week on average.
Wow. And it's been almost 4 years since you stopped. So,
Yeah.
um, interesting. So, yeah, why don't you maybe tell us like your origin story? Like, what got you started doing this in the first place? I mean, were you
Oh.
a photographer that needed to do this on a necessity, or did you pick it up from somebody else?
No, when I started repairing cameras, it dates back to the time when I left high school and I was hunting around for a job. And in those days, there were plenty of jobs. You just sort of got up on a Saturday morning and opened up the paper and you picked a job that you liked the look of and you went and got it. That was really what it amounted to. But one of the jobs I saw there was a camera technician or trainee camera technician for Kodak in Wellington. So I went along there and had an interview, and they rang me back a day or so later and said, yes, can you come and start? And so I started there. And of course, I wasn't there an awful long time. But in the first year or so, I was only allowed near Instamatics. And this was at the time, it's the end of 72, beginning of 73. So that's when the pocket Instamatics, the 110s, were being introduced. And since I was the new boy and no one else wanted and I had any prior experience with them either, I got lumped with all the 110s. And I used to do those. But the Instamatics, they were funny cameras to service. There wasn't an awful lot to them. And there was a standard fee. It didn't matter what was wrong with your Instamatic or your box brown, it used to cost $4. That was the going rate for one of those. Complete overhaul, minor fix, all $4. But what we used to do to fend off the boredom, we used to have time trials. You'd start with something like a Instamatic 133, something like that, and you'd hold back. Someone would start the clock and bang, you'd start ripping it to pieces, spread it out on the bench, clean all the sand out, because they're always full of sand, put it back together, click, click, gone, finished. And you'd get it down to about 90 seconds or something. It was a fun time. But no, I was there, I suppose I'd been there about 18 months. Kodak decided they were going to move their headquarters up to Auckland because I was living down in Wellington. And I was only, 17 at the time, or 18. That didn't appeal to me at all, moving up to Auckland. So I packed my bags at that stage and moved on to other things. But I'd always sort of been interested in collecting cameras, and I'd sort of gathered a few up along the way. Well, it wasn't until much later, I suppose, about the time of about 40 years ago. And we were a young family, 2 small kids, 1 income, mortgage to pay, all the rest of it. There was no spare money. But I still collected cameras. And that was when I first got hold of a Retina of my very own. I'd never bought one while I was at Kodak. And it was a Retina 1B. Of course, I could pull it apart and clean it up, fix it. It's amazing. Muscle memory would work you through it. I couldn't consciously remember what you did and what sequence. But if you looked out the window and your fingers went like this, it was all done for you, really. Muscle memory. So I did that. And of course, this is in the early days of the internet, I suppose. Then you start talking to other collectors and they find you can fix cameras and say you fix one of theirs. And then another collector would find you and you'd fix one of his. Well, eventually, of course, there was too many for that sort of thing. So then I started charging money for things like that. But it was interesting in the early days of collecting for me. This is going back to when eBay was brand new, when it wasn't even called eBay in those days, Auction Web it was called. And the security was tough. They gave you a 4-digit password. That's all you needed in those days. People were comparatively honest. But even from this part of the world, you could buy stuff on Auction Web from the photographic pages, and the photographic gear ran to 2 or 3 pages in those days. That's all it was. New stuff, old stuff, 2 or 3 pages. Didn't take long to scan through it, but you could gather stuff up. As it was a long time ago now, people were much more honest. There's a lot more trust about when you bought something, you'd sort of negotiate how it was going to be shipped. And of course, being on the other side of the world, what they call it surface shipping was still a thing. When they put it on a sailing ship and send it off, and 6 months later it'd get to you. But it only used to cost a couple of dollars. So that's about everything I bought. I got surface shipped. By the time it arrived, you'd forgotten what you'd ordered, really. It was fun. Great way to build up a collection of bits and pieces. And a lot of the things that I bought, because I could repair cameras, I never believed anyone when they told me that the camera was in working condition. So any camera that I saw on there that was supposedly in working condition, I just skipped straight past it. I was going for the ones that people admitted were dead because I knew they weren't lying. And so I just bought dead cameras. And then you buy parts cameras. And then you buy the remains of retired repairmen's collections, their pile of bits and pieces, and you get huge boxes of absolutely gutted cameras, where there's 2/3 of it's gone or half of it's gone. You hope you're going to get a few good pieces in it. I've got a lot of stray body castings here. I don't know what I'm going to do with them. To the tip one day, I suppose, to the scrap man. But that was the early days of eBay. And then later on, of course, I started my own web page because that was back in the times. Again, it's a long time ago when people trusted things. It was so long ago that having an email address was a clever thing. And they used to have a directory of their subscribers on the front page of the internet providers. Of course, now you'd be spammed to death. It took a wee while for that to catch on. But everybody got to have a home page, and it wouldn't have been much. It would have been a couple of pages you could have. So everybody would have a home page for their hobbies and interests. So it might be one person's garden, another person's cycling. Of course, I like to have my cameras. And then it grew and grew. And you start a web page, and then you move to another provider, one of those free ones. And it might have been GoDaddy or I can't even remember, Yahoo, one of those. And then it just spreads, and you take photos of all the cameras in your collection, and then you write up a little bit about them, and then you get to swap lies with people from all over the world about their camera collection, and they might ask you questions, and you might have the answer. And sometimes they'd have all the answers. So that was fun, and it just grew and grew. And I didn't get involved with YouTube until much, much later. And it was because I'd seen people making comments about my repairs in the past and saying, that bloke Sherlock, he knows his stuff, but he's very expensive, costs a fortune. And I thought, people just don't know what's involved in repairing these cameras, how much time goes into it. So I just started making a few videos just to show what was involved in taking a camera that's 50 or 60 years old and stripping it right down, servicing it, putting it back together and returning it back to working condition. That's like it was when it was new. And I think that was a bit of an eye-opener. But I was amazed. A lot of people found it very interesting, and so I just carried on making them. And then in the plague years, we were pretty much locked down here for months at a stretch, really, and a lot of other people were too. Life was a bit boring. So I just decided I'd just put out a video every day. So I just put out a short video each day. And I did that for a whole year. But that was a bit of hard work, getting another half an hour's content out there for people to look at. But then eventually, of course, old age catches up and you've got to retire. Make way for young people. I mean, I'm sure there's some young people out there, like you jokers out there, and see you're young. Let them have a go at all these cameras.
I remember you said once before that, what makes you special about being able to repair Kodak Retinas and the retina reflexes where maybe some of the other people couldn't. And I remember you telling me that there were other people capable of doing it, but one thing that differentiated you was you had such a large supply of spare parts.
Oh, that's it. Very.
Yeah. I mean, anybody who has the ability to and the tools to do it could technically take apart a Kodak, but if the cocking rack or something was stripped, they may not have another part, whereas you did.
That's true. And that's, as I say, I had an awful lot of parts cameras here. And when times were slow, I'd just gather them into a big heap and see what I could put back and together into one big camera that worked again. But your parts are quite important. But anybody wanting to repair a camera, and particularly if it's your favourite camera, it might be your dad's camera or your uncle's camera, something that's been passed down and it's dead, and you think you might want to fix it yourself, but you've never had a go at it before, the best thing to do is jump onto eBay and buy something identical and fix that first, because that'll be dead anyway. But you'll learn how to get into the thing without damaging it the second time round, and you'll have some spare parts too. So, I mean, it's always a good thing to buy something that's identical, or even two, and practice on taking them apart and hopefully getting them back together before you attack the one that you really want to fix.
So, Chris, this is Anthony. I just want to mention quickly that I told this story before on the show, but when I was born, my dad bought a Retina Reflex 3 to take my baby pictures. And then when I was around 13, he was always a camera nerd and always upgrading. He gave me that Retina Reflex as my first camera to learn how to shoot. And I shot through with that all through high school. And eventually it just sort of started getting sluggish, and I put it in a drawer and kind of forgot about it. And then after my father passed, I found the camera again and found out about you, and was able to get it down to you before you stopped working on cameras. I think I was like in the last wave that you were able to do. And you returned it to me as good as new. And I can't thank you enough for having been able to do that. It was a deeply meaningful thing to get that camera back in pristine condition, for all the work that you did. And I'm sure that there are a lot of people out there that would thank you, but it was such a service, and thank you so much for what you did.
Oh, that's good. It's always good to hear that things worked when they got home. Doesn't always happen like that.
I actually have it loaded this week and I'm still shooting it. So That camera is actually, and I love the xenon lens on it. It's a great camera.
Yes.
A little fiddly, but a little over engineered perhaps. But when they're working, they're really something else.
The Reflex 3 is a good one if you're thinking of getting into the adventure of playing with Retina reflex cameras, because there's probably more of them than any other model, and they're less highly regarded, possibly because there's more of them, and possibly because a lot of people don't like the fact that the shutter release is on the front instead of the top. And so they're cheap, and there's plenty of them, and they were probably the most reliable of the Retina reflex cameras. So, yeah, they were good.
Well, it's funny because I had been in Berlin at a conference about 8 months before I sent the camera to you, and I had gone to a number of different shops that were dealing in vintage cameras, and I asked them if they had anybody in Berlin that would service the camera, and the guy just sort of laughed and he pointed up on the wall and he goes, "The last person who would service them did that, and he swore never again." And he'd done like an exploded view of the camera where he had taken every single part out and like created like an exploded view of the camera with all the parts. And he just shook his head and he goes, "No more, no more."
Is there anybody else here who has something that they've had serviced by Chris, either directly or indirectly?
I bought Retina 3C, a little C, from Paul Barden, who I believe is your successor in the repair business.
That's right, yes.
And it's lovely. And then I've also followed a couple of your videos. I've done a Super Silette, which is a really lovely little camera that I've had forever. And then I just did a Super Iconta following one of your.
Oh, okay.
This is BX, which is a little bit different from your video, but overall it was very easy to make the jump from what you had in your video to this model. So thank you very much for putting out those videos. You've saved a whole lot of cameras out there.
And it's worth noting too. I mean, I think most people know this, but I'll say it in case they don't. I mean, well, Chris is Retina Rescue, and that's what he's most famous for. I mean, you're not limited to just retinas. I was able to repair a Fotlander Vitessa. The plunger would go down and it would get stuck and it wouldn't ever pop back up properly. Like it felt like it was just rubbing up against something. And Chris, you had done a complete teardown video of the entire camera. And I didn't need to go that far because the shutter was actually still working okay. And I lack the skill, of course, that you have and the tools, but I can get far enough in there to where I could at least clean the plunger and the linkage. And I was able to do just what Michael just said and get to where I needed to be, just following your video step by step. I mean, you do a great job with it. And the camera is like straight down in there, clear, easy to see. You don't go super fast. You don't skip important parts. I mean, I think that was a great idea when you said that you wanted to justify what you charge for this because of how much time it takes. People really need to see how intricate some of these cameras are and what it takes to actually service them the right way, and not like those crazy people who just pour like lighter fluid all over their cameras and hope that it works for 5 minutes.
Lighter fluid's a good trick. It does. If you use it right, it can do wonderful things, but it can't do everything.
Right, of course. Looks like Joao has a question.
Yeah, actually, more of a comment. You asked about directly or indirectly. Well, quite indirectly. Similarly, Paul Biden serviced a 2C, little c for me. And one little trick I learned, there was this company, this store in Indiana, that had a bunch of original Kodak cocking racks for the little 2C. Yeah. So I bought a few of them, and I have them because I understand that's sort of a common failure point for the camera. So I figure I like to use it quite a bit. So and they still have a bunch. So I think it's a good tip for people who like it to have at least that possibility.
Chris, weren't there certain models where the cocking rack is more likely to fail than others?
Any of the 3C series, really, the 1B, 2B, 2C, 3C, the cocking racks on those are nothing like as robust as the earlier 1A, 2A. They had a much more solid cocking rack. So yeah, those ones, the 1B, 2C and 3C, they are ones that are most likely to fail. There's usually a cause. It's usually not the rack itself that wears out. It doesn't sort of wear out and stop working or wear out and fall to bits. Usually there's a cause. And so it means that typically if the camera hasn't been serviced well when the cocking rack's gone previously, I can remember when I worked at Kodak, there wasn't an awful lot of thought went into that. The camera would come in with a broken cocking rack, stripped cocking rack, and it would be replaced. And perhaps the little gear on the pinion on the top of the film advance would be replaced. That was pretty much it. There wasn't a great deal of thought about why it failed in the first place, so you could make sure that it wasn't going to fail again promptly in the future. People would just replace the parts, and that was it. Of course, it's different times. The cameras were, what then, they would have been 15 years old or something. That's almost new as cameras go. So it's a different world altogether, servicing current cameras compared with servicing rotten old antiques that are older than the old serviceman. But yes, the cocking racks on the 1B, 2C, 3C, they were probably the ones that are most likely to go. With the reflexes, when they got to the original Retina reflex, basically the cocking rack was similar to the 3C, a little bit beefier, not much. And then they moved to doing that same cocking rack got used in the Retina Reflex S. And they did strip a little, fairly often, not as much as the rangefinder cameras, because they were better supported. There was a little bush behind the cocking rack, which kept it in firm contact with the pinion on the top of the film advance. So even under load, it didn't deflect away and end up damaged. But they did fail. So when the Reflex 3 came out, they made a beefier cocking rack for that. And by the time they got to the Reflex 4, they had made that even beefier again. It's some hardened steel rack. And by that stage, they were breaking other parts in the camera instead. There always has to be a weak link when someone gets on the end of the lever and starts pulling and it doesn't want to go. Some parts got to break. So it became other things inside the reflex cameras instead. The cocking racks were fine on the 3s and 4s, hard to strip them. But instead it was the little pinions at the back and the transfer shaft and all sorts of other exciting parts, much harder to get to.
I've heard that before. For a short while, I was into RC cars, like Traxxas remote control cars, and a lot of the suspension pieces on those cars are made out of plastic. And there were a lot of companies offering metal replacement pieces. It's like, if you're tired of breaking your lower control arm on your car, just replace it with a metal one. The problem is, though, is that the lower control arm is like a $3 part to replace if it's plastic. Well, if you put the metal one in, it won't break, but then it'll shear off parts of the frame, and the frame is way more expensive to replace. So I imagine that was probably similar with the cameras, that if you make one part too strong, then the next weakest part breaks and can sometimes be a more expensive repair. Now, I can keep asking questions, but we have a lot of people here, so I want to allow people to kind of ask what they will. It doesn't always have to be repairs. I know we did a Retina show about a year ago with Dr. David Yentz, and we really covered a lot of the history with him. But one thing we didn't get into a lot on that show was like the nuances, and people like to ask what's your favorite Retina, or what's a good Retina to get started with if it's a camera system that you've never shot before. So if anybody has any questions about the different models, I mean, you have the expert here, so go ahead and ask.
What is it the three big C the best, Mr. Sherlock?
Well, the 3C. Now, the 3C models, the 3 big C was their last one. That's the last one they made. And the biggest difference between that and its predecessor, it differed in 2 ways. The first way was the exposure meter. It was a single range exposure meter instead of the dual range exposure meter of the earlier 3Cs. So that means you didn't have that little metal flap on the meter that you needed to remember to flip up out of the way. And they used to get snapped off anyway and cause all sorts of problems. So that was the first thing that was improved. But the main thing that made a difference to using the camera was the viewfinder system. On the 3 big C cameras, you've got a big, bright viewfinder system, and it has the frame lines for the wide angle, the 35 and the 80mm telephoto, and the standard lens visible inside the finder, which made quite a difference. It made a big difference if you were silly enough to be using the accessory lenses, because they're no fun with the Retinas. They're terrible, those folders, hard to use.
But that's another question. Are these auxiliary lenses good enough to, like a prime?
Oh yes, they'll work very well, but they're just so cumbersome to use.
Yes.
Use the rangefinder on your camera, and that'll tell you the distance you need to be focused at. But then you have to transfer that onto another scale at the bottom of the camera. That distance, you transfer it to the wide or the tele end of the scale. And then you'll be focused for your wide angle or tele ends, whichever one you've got fitted. But of course, by then, even the scenery's got tired and wandered off into the distance. So, I mean, yeah, they're an awkward thing to use.
I had to reread the manual when they use any lenses.
Yes.
And for anybody not familiar with these cameras, the reason you can't just use the rangefinder and you have to transfer the distance, like what Chris was explaining, was that the Retinas, at least the rangefinders, and even the very first SLR, it wasn't a true interchangeable lens. It was what would you call it? Like a hybrid, maybe, where you're replacing the front group, but the rear group.
Yeah, convertible, I think they call them.
So you're only changing part of the lens, and that it kind of throws it off. Plus, for like the 3C, little C, big C, all the ones where you could change them that fold, you can no longer fold the camera when you have the auxiliary lenses on it either. So another con, we'll call it. Good question, Fernando.
So I have a Retina 2. I believe it's a Type 14. Could be wrong on that one. It's great. It's in great shape, but one of the lens elements has haze on it, and I can't seem to clean it off. Chris, do you know anything that works on these old Retina lenses to clean off haze?
That shouldn't be a great problem. You should be able to get that lens apart well enough to get to most of the surfaces. The camera that causes the most problems with haze is the Retina 2A, and it's only the Retina 2As that have the Snyder Xenon lens. I used to think that it was in the cement layer between the cemented elements, and that's where the problem was. But I cut one of the rear lenses out of its brass mount once, because I've always got spares. And I wanted to open up the lens and see that was where the haze was, but I discovered it wasn't in the cement layer at all. It was on the interior surfaces of the glass lens. This happens on the front and rear groups. It's the ones that are closest to the shutter blades, the most internal ones. And I did some research on that, and basically it was the glass deteriorating with age. It wasn't just oil haze, and it wasn't fungus or anything like that. It was the actual glass deteriorates, and it's just unusual. They probably never knew because, I think in the 50s, they're probably still producing lots of different optical glasses and having a wonderful time with it. They'd have no way of knowing what it was going to do in another 25 or 30 or 50 years' time when the atmospheric contaminants and other things had got at it, and the glass just deteriorates. There's a haze there. You can't get it out. The only way around that would be to have the lens repolished.
Was it the coating or the lens? Glass?
I think it was the lens. I think it was the glass.
Did you try to strip the coating off? I do that on some lenses.
Well, I think you can do that, but that wouldn't fix it. It was actually the glass.
You think it's actually the glass?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, it took me a long time to come to that conclusion, but that was it.
This one only has one surface that appears to be bad, and no chemical that I've tried on it seems to take the haze off.
Michael, which lens is it? Is it an Ektar?
This is a Retina Xenon f2.
Okay, it's a Xenon.
Yeah.
I've got a Type 1 010 that has haze, I believe, inside the front element.
You can normally get those ones apart and clean them. That Type 010, you can normally get that front lens element apart and get in at those surfaces. Yeah, sometimes I've seen those and they're just very, very hazy. They look like they've got a cataract, but they clean up. If you get them all apart, they'll clean, and then they're quite good. I know they're not a coated lens. They're good with a hood.
Yeah, I think I'm going to send this to Doug Willoughby and let him play with it, because the lens, the shutter is fine on it, and the lens has got a little haze. The big problem is that the focus is stuck.
Oh, okay, yeah. That's the helical, yeah. Yeah, it's just the grease just dies with old age. It turns into concrete.
Well, fortunately, it's stuck at infinity. So it's going to be stuck somewhere. Infinity's the best place to have it. So.
Well, you can't close it unless it's at infinity,
That's
right?
right.
So that's why it would freeze there. Send it along, Paul.
Yeah, I think I'm going to do that because right now on the shelf, I only have two Retina cameras, and the other one is a 1BS, which
Oh,
is
yes, yeah,
has a dead meter, but the shutter on it's fine, and the lens is
yeah.
as clean as can be.
I
So
have a question. The mentioning of those pre-war Ektar, yet that is not a Kodak manufactured lens, is that? Or excuse me, was that not a made in Germany? To my knowledge, that's the only time they put the name Ektar on something they didn't make in Rochester. Is that accurate?
I think so. I think it was made by Snyder,
Ah,
those ones, the Retina 1 lenses. There were also Ektars used on the Retina 2s, some of them, and they were an f2 lens, 49mm f2, I think. And they would have been American lenses, but the other ones, the 50mm f3.5s, yeah, I'm pretty sure they were made by Snyder.
Yeah, they were. We see a lot of them here in Michigan. We have a big German population here, so a lot of the second, third generations brought their father's cameras, grandfather's were made. It's the same camera. It just has a Ektar name on the lens. Yeah.
well, it is fascinating that early in the Ektar evolution, excuse me, in the Retina evolution, they thought, aha, we'll call it an Ektar. I guess they just thought all of our best lenses are Ektar, so that's what we'll call it. I've always found that fascinating.
Yeah, Ektar was certainly just a trade name. It was not a formulation.
And they went off and ruined it in the latter generation of the 110s. They started calling those cameras Ektars. That was sad. But anyway,
They made a smartphone called that, I think, didn't they?
why not ruin it completely?
Yeah.
Chris, do you still do any photography, or
I do, but mostly these times I'm using the digital cameras when I need something at all, because I'm often doing odd things like taking stereo photos. And I used to have a couple of Canons that I had linked on a big bracket, which worked very well, but I've got a Fuji 3D camera here somewhere, and I find that very handy for taking photos.
Oh, cool. So if you were shooting though a Retina, what would you shoot?
Well, various models are good for different things, but if I was using a folder, the Retina 2C is probably a good choice. I wouldn't be using the accessory lenses, so Retina 2 Big C is not something I'd necessarily be hunting out because it just makes it a bulkier camera. But a Retina 2C is a nice camera, very good lens, simple to use. If I was using a rigid fronted camera, well, the Retina 3S rangefinder, that's great because there's a good range of accessory lenses for that. They all work well. That's a great camera. It's very convenient to use. You'll get great results with that, providing it's working. If you wanted something that was slightly smaller, the Retina 2S is good. That was the size of the Retinettes, but it had a 45mm Xenar lens on it, fixed, of course. But that's a very convenient camera, nice rangefinder, because the rangefinder is similar to the Retina 3S, similar to the Retina 3 Big C, really. But quite nice cameras to use and a little bit more compact. But as for the earlier folders, well, they were much of a muchness, really. If you wanted something that was small and could go into your pocket, the Retina 1, the 010, that would be a good choice because there's plenty of them about, and they're not particularly expensive. They're pretty robust. So yeah, they would be a good choice if you just wanted something in your pocket and you were willing to be able to estimate your exposure and your focus distances and so forth, which of course is something you can get used to fairly quickly.
And that's the kind of answer that's probably thrown a lot of people listening into a rabbit hole now, because they're probably just ticking off all the whole list that you've just gone through.
Well, I'm really glad you mentioned the 3S because I really like that camera a lot too. It's the non-folding camera, but it has pretty much everything you'd really want from a German rangefinder of that era, and it's just not one that you hear a lot of people talk about. And admittedly, I probably haven't shot mine in over 5 years, so maybe I should. This will be my inspiration to pull it out.
Just don't set the self-timer.
No, definitely not.
Chris, I'm curious, did you service the pre-Retinas, the Nagel cameras?
No, well, I never used to see those much. I've only seen one or two in recent years. Part of the problem with living over in this part of the world was when you go back to the 30s, that was the time of the Great Depression. There wasn't much money about here, and the import restrictions on stuff were pretty steep. So fancy cameras hardly ever came in at all. you used to have a special license. If you had to be a professional photographer, you could get a license to import a camera. That's how bad it used to be in those days. There just weren't hundreds and thousands of them about. And if there weren't many coming in, then they never really got here. Post-war, the situation was pretty tight right through until the 70s, probably, when things started to ease up. One of the big things that people went on an overseas holiday, and I think this was probably the same all over the world. Men wanted to come back with something shiny from the duty-free, and typically it was a camera. So people who really didn't know anything about photography at all, who'd never used anything better than a box brownie, would come home with something shiny when they had an overseas holiday, something they could buy at the duty-free, along with their 2 cartons of cigarettes and a bottle of whiskey.
I have a question about your service or when you used to do it. I live in Nuremberg in Germany, and it's really easy to get one retina in the flea market. When you did the CLA in any retina, did you disassemble all the blades in the shutter all the time?
Yes. Yeah, that was standard practice. That was one thing that was pretty standard. When you serviced the shutter, it used to be stripped down completely. The shutter blades used to be polished with metal polish at the time, and everything reassembled, and you would get a new spring. If it was one of the later ones, the 3Cs, it would get a new main spring, and then it was all set up and sent on its way again. So yes, they used to get quite a thorough sort of treatment, but that was fairly common. It used to be said that for one of those shutters to stay in full working order, it needed to be serviced every 5 years or so. But in practice, you can probably stretch that 2 or 3 times and still expect them to work quite well. And with an old one that you've picked up at the garage sale or whatever, as long as you stick to the mid-range shutter speeds, a 60th and a 125th and perhaps a 250th, they're the speeds that are most likely to be somewhat close to the marked speed, or as close as they're going to be, and are not so likely to jam up. The fast speeds were never that fast.
The fast were really the speed they make, or they're always like 20% margin?
Well, Kodak, of course, they were all when I was working there, they were all new parts, and they were all coming in from Germany. The likes of that, they'd have been coming from Kodak and Stuttgart, presumably. But parts are a problem. When I was working at Kodak, eventually models would get to the stage where they decide they hadn't got enough spare parts. They were too troublesome to make spare parts for them, and they'd decide the cameras were obsolete. So I don't think I remember striking that particularly, but certainly by the stage, and this is in the 70s, by that stage, the earliest retinas would have been on the obsolete list. So that would be the early pre-war stuff. They'd have decided they were obsolete. And one of the reasons, of course, is if you're servicing equipment like that and it comes in with a minor problem and you can fix it, you're not going to need any parts. And then you send it out with its 3-month warranty and the person takes it away and breaks something. They expect it to be repaired under warranty. But of course, if there are no parts available, you're really behind the 8 ball, really. And so bigger organisations, they don't want to be looking for trouble. It's much easier to decide we can't service that because we can't get new parts, even if on this particular occasion, parts are probably not required. It's just the way the world works.
I liked when you said 60, 100, and 125, maybe 250 are the most likely to work. And that's when I review cameras, I don't have the money, time, or ability to get every single camera I touch fully CLA'd before I shoot it. So that's why I shoot a lot of 100 speed film when I do my test rolls, because I'll typically just leave the shutter at 100, 125 and just find lighting that works with that speed. And you're right. You could have a camera that completely locks open on the slow speeds. You could have a focal plane shutter that won't even open at 1/1000th, but 60, 100 probably works fine.
Yeah.
Which, if you were to recommend one for someone to start tinkering with, which one is the least intimidating?
Well, a Retinette's probably a good camera to start with. Retinette's, if you're going for something Kodak, simpler, and there's plenty of them about. If you're looking for a Retinette 1A, that was the model that there were just heaps and heaps of them about. I've got at least 10 sitting here I'd like to see the back of. So, yeah, something like a Retinette would be good. If you were choosing a Retina to repair, or knowing that the cocking rack is the known weakness of the Retina 2C, 3C series, that would be enough to put you off that, I would think. I would say a Retina 1A. Don't think they're as common in the States as they are in other parts of the world. The Retina 1A is quite a good wee camera. Doesn't have the complication of having a rangefinder, but otherwise it's just like a Retina 2A. Film advance is exactly the same. It's a nice, simple camera which will produce very good results. And if you wanted a knob wind camera instead, then the Retina 1010, is it 1010? Yeah, that would be a good one. And that's the first post-war one. That's quite good. Relatively simple mechanically, not much to go wrong with them there. Just hardly ever see anything broken in the film advance with those. Typically, it's the case of everything's just stuck with a grease and dirt and perhaps a little bit of corrosion. They clean up well. And f3.5 50mm lens, they work well.
Hey, Chris, this is Doug. Just wanted to, I got to leave here in a minute. I just want to really thank you for all the work you've done, all your videos. I tell you, I just signed on here mainly to see you. I swear I could tell your hands. I could pick your hands out of a lineup. Yeah, I call them Sherlock hands. And after a while, you start to adopt the Sherlock mannerisms when you work on cameras. I find myself with the camera body in between my two hands, and then I kind of thump my thumbs as I think about it, and I go, well, I guess I find myself doing a Chris Sherlock. So I tell you, it's a total pleasure to see you in person, and I can't tell you how wonderful your videos have been. I actually watch them to relax at night sometimes because you have
good with the beer.
good with the beer. Hey, thanks again, Chris. I really appreciate it.
That's good. I'm pleased to hear that.
Thanks for coming on, Doug. I was going to call you because you said you were going to join, but you wouldn't speak. So I'm glad you spoke on your own.
No, I had to. I was joking with Mike and Paul about hero worship because you can tell a real craftsman, and you definitely only by your hands. You definitely it's all good.
Awesome.
So,
Thanks for coming.
Thanks a lot. Take care. Bye-bye.
See you, Doug.
Yeah, Doug.
Chris, is there a camera that you find most difficult to service, one of the Retinas, or often gives you trouble, or are they all pretty easy for you now, pretty straightforward?
Yeah, the Retinas that I don't fix would be the automatics. I've never liked the automatics. I don't like the whole idea of automatics, really. And the automatics are pretty complicated. They're an awful thing to fix. And so, yes, that's one that I avoid. I think I got tricked into servicing one a couple of years ago. I forget which model it was now. I thought I was servicing something else. I'd agreed to it. And then, of course, once it arrived, I was stuck with it. And I just don't like those. They rub me up the wrong way.
What about non-retinas, though? I mean, you did do other types of cameras, too. But did you do any
non-retinas? Well, typically, I gravitate to cameras with leaf blade shutters. I don't tend to have much to do with focal plane shuttered cameras. And I certainly wouldn't go out of my way to pick one up, but leaf blade shuttered cameras, because I can sort of get around the retina reflex cameras quite well. I got Braun pack set reflex. I got hold of one of those. It was in pieces, and that was a jigsaw puzzle I had to put together. That was fun. But that sort of camera, yes, I can deal with quite well. I've done a few odd Japanese cameras with leaf blade shutters. Of course, there's no service information available for them. You just have to dive in and hope that you'll get out again alive.
In the Leica world, Leicas are well known for being pretty well built. The Soviet copies are generally of a lower quality, and then you have the Japanese copies, and not all Japanese copies are equal. A lot of people believe that the Nikka rangefinders, later Yashicas, were generally on the same level as the original Leica. Now, you're familiar with the Retina, but there were other similar folding leaf shutter cameras made in Germany by like Certo, the Delinas, Velta, Balda made cameras. Were there any contemporaries to the Retina that were of similar quality, or were they inferior? Like, can you?
Yeah, I think most of those cameras you've mentioned were pretty similar. I think it was probably Kodak's marketing strength that meant that it could sell more cameras. And because you can sell more cameras, you can make more cameras, you can get into the economics of mass production, and you can make better cameras available for the same sort of money. And I think that's why we tended to see lots of Retinas compared to the others. And the Retinas quite possibly, they would be more profitable for the manufacturer, I would say. But certainly they're probably a better camera for the money because they could make them at scale. I think that's probably where the secret was. They're all good cameras. Generally, they're using the same shutters, or it's either a Prontor shutter or it's a Echo shutter, and then the lenses often came from the same providers. So they were all good, really. Yeah. The cameras that stand out as being probably very good value for money as a user would have been the Agfas. The Agfas Selects and similar cameras to that. They were a well-made camera, very simple, well-made. The standard of finish wasn't as high. The quality of the plating that they used on the top covers and so forth wasn't as good. And so they probably looked nice and shiny when they were brand new, and they would have been an attractive price, but they haven't stood the test of time in terms of finish. The chrome finish on the Kodak Retinas or the Zeiss Icon cameras or the Voigtlanders was much superior. They're just like a more attractive camera this late stage when they're in their old age.
Norris wanted to know, is there a camera, we call it unobtainium, a camera that after all these years you've always wanted to get your hands on, but you haven't yet?
Well, of course, the first Retina 2 model was the Type 122, and they didn't make an awful lot of them, and they were an awful camera. I've always wanted one of those, but I've never seen one that's come around at a price I was willing to agree to. So I've repaired a few for other people. They were a shocking camera. They were over-specified and under-engineered. I think that's the only way you could say it. They do all sorts of wonderful fancy tricks, but they'd only do it for 5 minutes if you used them carefully. They were just too lightly built. It's a shame. And of course, they replaced it with the next Retina 2, which was a knob wind instead of the lever advance for the film, which simplified things on the film advance. Everything else stayed much the same. But you got away with the wonderful stowable shutter release button that they had on the top, where you pulled back the button and you could stow the shutter release and release the button, and the shutter release button was now flush with the top plate, and you couldn't accidentally fire the shutter when you didn't intend to. Very interesting thing, but just over-specified and under-engineered. And the Retinet they made at the same time, the first of the Retinets, Type 147, that was designed by the same team, I think. The shutter release on that's just a nightmare. If you can find one that works, you've done very well. But you have another one which is pretty much identical, and even though everything looks to be in exactly the right place, it just doesn't want to release. And most of them have had the shutter releases removed from them completely because they're just a complicated mess.
Was that first Retinet the one that the door folded down instead of to the side? Yeah, I've seen one ever, and it went for a price I was unwilling to pay.
Yeah. I mean, if they had a working shutter release, that would be worth paying for because they're few and far between. But most of them don't. Most of them don't have a working shutter release.
How many time do you really spend typically in one CLA, one camera?
How much time do I spend?
Working on one camera, doing
a
CLA.
Yeah, if I was repairing so let's take a Retina 2C. If I had a Retina 2C and I was servicing that, if I went straight at it, there were no interruptions and everything went really well, you can get it down to about 5 hours.
5 hours?
Yep.
Wow.
But if you're talking a Retina Reflex, for example, if you can get it down 12 hours on the bench, you're doing really well. They just eat up the time. And that's when things are going nicely. Things don't always go nicely.
But think about it, Fernando. That's 5 hours with nothing going wrong, dedicating your entire focus. And this is a guy who has spent almost 40 years doing it. You know, the amount of knowledge that he has. I mean, I installed a hot water heater once in my house. It took me 12 hours to do it. If I'd have hired a plumber, he'd have it done in an hour. So, you know, there's a huge difference there. 5 hours for Chris time would be 50 for somebody who doesn't know what they're doing.
No, that's why my question for somebody that doesn't know is really crazy.
It's a lot of work.
Do you do one by one? When you finish one camera, you begin the next, or not necessarily?
Yeah, I'd normally do that. Only if I'm feeling very excited would I take two cameras apart at the same time. I could probably do it. If they're models I'd know, I could take them apart and mix them all the parts up and make two cameras out of it. But no, that's too exciting. People might not be keen if they got the bits and pieces back that weren't theirs. No, so typically one camera at a time. Yeah, I don't think I've ever got to the stage where I dislike the repair job so much that I have to put it aside and go on to something else.
Yes.
So you're still making YouTube videos. I mean, I saw one as recently as 5 days ago. So since you've been retired, you still have stuff to repair. Is this all things that just piled up over the years that you have sitting in your house, or are these cameras from your personal collection that you're making these videos about now?
Yeah, no, it's a bit of a mixture. I've got a large collection of them, and inevitably, you know, they got put away in the display cabinet 20 years ago and they worked particularly well, and now they don't. It's just the way life is. So you pull them out, look at them, and discover that they don't go, and you're going to have to fix them again, and you do. That's what you do. But the others, no, I gather up cameras. I have gathered up cameras in the past. People have sort of part exchanged cameras against the cost of a repair, for example. So they might send me 2 cameras or 3 cameras and they want one back. And I'd give them a reduced rate on the repair, given that I expected to get good parts off the other ones or repair them and sell them on. But of course, there's often not the time to repair them and sell them on. And so stuff ends up in cartons stacked in the corner for ages. And then eventually you have to get rid of them one way or another. But trade's a bit difficult at the moment. You can't just post things to the States as you once did in the mail. If it's a gift, if you're sending a gift to the States and it's under a certain amount, that's not a problem. But if you were selling something, say you had a camera and you wanted the princely sum of $100 for it, well, then that would be, you'd be paying import tariffs and God knows what else at the other end. You know, I think there's an $80 fixed fee before you get to the 15% tariff that they lump on, which means that it's just impossible for me to sell any of my cameras into the United States at the moment. Of course, this won't go on forever because nothing ever does. I mean, they have elections for a start. People come in with new ideas. So yes, international trade's a bit difficult at the moment. Otherwise, I'd probably be selling a lot of my cameras off. The United States is a wonderful market because it's full of rich people.
When you were at your peak of repairing things, was a majority of your customers from the US, or did you get a lot from?
Yes,
okay,
definitely. Yeah, I would say two-thirds of my customers would be from the States. Most of the other third would be from Europe, and not many locals. A scattering of Australians, and that was about it, really.
Did you ever build up a network of other technicians who would like send you stuff or ask for help from you for information if maybe they got a retina or something that they were unwilling to tackle, or did you not really collaborate much with other technicians?
Oh, I didn't really, but people would contact me for information and I'd give it. So I got no idea whether they were charging someone for the results once they had the answer. So I don't know. I think you could spend an awful lot of your life collaborating and not earning a living.
Yeah, of course. Anybody have any questions?
Howard Sandler had a comment. Do you want to say that on camera there?
Yeah, Howard, he wanted to thank you. He said he had a retina reflex 3 and he couldn't understand why the focus was different between the split image spot and the rest of the ground glass. He said he watched your video and you explained that there's 2 separate layers of glass and that in his particular camera, someone must have been inside it and installed the ground glass the wrong way. He was able to get it apart using your video and get it correct. Unfortunately, he lost a screw for the light meter. It got sucked into the meter housing, He gave up trying to get it out, and he considered it a trade-off for a broken light meter, but a camera that could focus correctly. So he was happy. But, as funny as that is, I mean, I think that's how you learn.
Oh,
I
you
mean,
do. Yeah.
I'm not going to ask you to tell us of all your repairs that didn't go well, but I'm sure there's some, and you just learn from that.
Well, you do. That's the way life works. I mean, they commonly say that he who never broke something never made anything. I mean, that's true.
Right.
It's certainly true with repairs. Things don't always go smoothly, and that's the mark of a technician's skill. Really, is not when things are going well. It's when things go badly, how well they can dig themselves back out.
Now, one thing that surprised me that you had talked to me about previously, but I wanted to get your thoughts on it, is inside of the reflexes, the exposure aperture control wheel that's below the shutter is connected up top using a string. I think you said it's actually made out of like a silk or something like that.
I'm pretty sure it was silk in the
Silk.
first ones. Yeah, it's very, very strong.
Yeah, okay, so the string, in my mind, I'm picturing a mechanical cameras filled with metal gears and levers. So when I find out that there's literally a string with a whole bunch of pulleys connecting one side of the camera to another, that seemed shocking to me. But you had commented that the string itself is fairly strong, but what would cause something like that to fail?
The easiest way to kill them is to take the lens off, take the 3 screws off the front, lift out the control rings for the shutter speed and the aperture, and then have no idea where you're putting them back relative to the meter system, because that's where the limits, those controls limit how far that cord moves in any direction. So if you have those wheels in the wrong place, you can move the wheel on the bottom of the camera and it reaches the end of the rope basically, and then something's going to snap. And that's probably the majority of the retina reflex S, 3 and 4. If they've got a broken cord in the meter, the majority of them will be because someone removed the rings from the front of the camera, presumably because the controls were a bit stiff, and put them back in the wrong place. That's the easiest way to break them. Otherwise, another thing that will break them very well is if you've got a retina reflex S or a retina 3S and it gets dropped on its head. And then the exposure meter housing at the top there is forced into the drum on the top of the meter so that there's a great deal of friction there. And then when you pull the wheel across on the bottom of the camera, something's going to go. And typically it's the cord.
Do you think the higher price of the Rodenstock lenses in the Retinas is worth it? You think they're substantially a better lens, or do you think it's just because they're less common than the Retina Xenons or the Ectars?
Yeah, definitely because they're less common. They might be slightly different, but I don't think there's anything to pick in it really. I mean, we all like to consider ourselves great photographers, and we can do wonderful things with wonderful lenses, but I mean, a lot of the times it doesn't matter what lens you're using. If you're in the right place at the right time with vaguely the right exposure and it's focused correctly, just about anything's good. But the Rodenstock lenses in the States in particular, because they were never imported there by Kodak, they've got that cachet. They're just a bit rare. People think they're a bit special and that they should have one. And of course you should. I mean, if you collect cameras, you've got to have one with the Rodenstock lens and one with the Snyder lens. And, everything. If they came in different colours, you'd have to have one that's even every colour of the rainbow too.
In the last Retina episode we did, Dr. Gents said that a lot of people, especially in the United States, will pay a premium for the Retina 2 with the 50mm or the 49mm Ektar lens, the f2.
Yeah.
But he said though, in the year that lens was put on those cameras, it wasn't any rarer than the Schneider versions. There were approximately the same number of them made, yet the Ektars are just highly sought after by collectors, and they end up driving the prices up, but they're no more rare.
No. They look interesting because they're a black mount instead of a chrome mount, and they've got that wonderful purple look to the coating, which makes them look very interesting. So, yeah, everyone's got to have an Ektar. I've got a Retina 2A here with an Ektar lens that I put on there. That's interesting.
Do you know, was that the same lens that was on the Bantam Special?
As far as I know, it's the same lens, yeah.
Okay. Because I came across, I don't have it anymore because it was a loaner, but I had come across a Bantam Special, the black camera with the silver
Yeah.
tuxedo lines on it. And it had inside the film compartment a little yellow sticker. It said serviced by Chris Sherlock, 2015. So you've CLA'd at least one of those before.
Well, that's right. I haven't done a lot, so that's maybe one of two or three that I've probably done. Yeah.
I joined late. I'm not sure if you've discussed other leaf shutter reflexes, but I partly Anthony Roux is to blame, but I got obsessed with the Ultramatics from
Right. Yeah.
Voigtlander. They're beautiful cameras. I had a Bessematic. It worked fine, but I heard about the instant return mirror on the Ultramatic, and I thought the styling was nicer, so I got an Ultramatic. The first one was dead on arrival. It never worked. A few years later, I had an opportunity to get another one. That one worked, and it was a lovely camera for a couple of years, and then I don't know what I did. It sort of got out of all the things that have to happen, got out of sequence. And I tried to go in and I never got it to work again. It's a shelf queen that I donated it to a local camera store just to display because the chrome work is so nice on those. But I just wanted to ask if you've ever worked on those. I could never find anyone who said that they worked on Ultramatics.
No, I was asked by some. I've got one here in pieces in a box. I'm not even sure that it's all there. Another collector brought it to me when he was visiting many years ago, really, and said, well, if you ever get time, do you think you better put this back together for me? And it just sat here ever since. I don't have to give it back now because, unfortunately, he's no longer with us. So it's my Ultramatic in little pieces in a box now. But no, I've looked at it from time to time. Every Christmas I used to, when I wasn't working, I used to drag out. I'd always have projects that I wanted to get done over Christmas. And every Christmas for a few years, I'd drag out this Ultramatic, open up the box, look at it closely again and put the box back and put it back in the cupboard and it would stay there. And it's still here to this day. I think I've stolen the lens off it. I don't think I've taken the prism out, but I've stolen the lens out of it to go on a Bessematic. But no, the Ultramatic, I've never serviced one, never taken a screwdriver to one.
Okay. I'm kind of heartened to hear you say that even a Retina reflex could be about 12 hours on the bench because the fact that I was able to get in, reverse the ground glass and get back out and still have mostly working camera in about 2 hours, my track record at self-repair, like I know I wouldn't have the patience to spend more than a few hours on a camera. So I'm kind of glad that to hear that it's definitely out of my league to go further into a camera than that. So anyways, thank you so much for the videos that you've provided. Not only the Retina reflex, but I had until recently a very nice working 2C rangefinder. Yeah. And I specifically got the 2C because I saw some advice that I think was in your videos about the cocking rack being much more reliable on the bottom winder Retinas than the 2A, for example. So I was looking for a 2C. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
We've heard stories from Anthony who couldn't get his Retina reflex repaired in Berlin, but Paul Barden won't even touch the reflexes. Howard couldn't get his Voigtlander repaired. Is it just the additional parts that make them more complicated? Why people are reluctant to want to take them apart, or is there something inherently inferior about leaf shutter SLRs that make people not want to repair them?
Well, they are pretty complex. There's an awful lot of parts and things that have to move in the right sequence. So timing of various gears and things becomes very important. One of the big problems for repairers with old gear is that when somebody presents a camera to you and they say they need the shutter repaired or the film advance isn't working, that's not the only fault. There'll be other faults there too. And I found many years ago that with an older camera, if you wanted to repair it and send it back working, you had to have it completely apart. Everything had to come out of the body because otherwise it's inevitable that there would be some part would be sticky with dried grease, or there'd be a bit of grit somewhere, or the screws would be loose somewhere deep in the guts. Not in the part you'd originally gone in to repair, but deep in the guts elsewhere. And it would be after you've got the camera back together and the leatherettes are glued back in place and you've polished everything and you're ready to slide it away in the plastic bag and send it back to its owner, you'd give it one final test and you'd notice something. And the whole thing would have to come completely down in order to fix it. And so the only way to stop that happening is strip it completely down to start off with. And so you're building on rock solid foundations then. And each piece that you put back into the camera has to be cleaned, lubricated correctly. All the screws have to be tightened correctly. You have to watch the timing as you go out. And in most cases, when you do the final few pieces on the top of the camera and close it up, it's going to continue working. It's going to be good. Old cameras, they're not like working on new cameras. New cameras, when a new camera has something that's broken, it's the something that's broken. It's just one piece. It's just something that's gone. You replace it with another identical part, everything whizzes along nicely. But old cameras is not just one problem. The whole thing's a problem. You've got to
Makes sense.
cut that off at the knees by making sure there are no problems at all.
Well, and if people aren't appreciating the effort that goes into repairing the rangefinders, then they're certainly not going to appreciate the additional complexity of an SLR. So that makes sense.
Yeah, it's just the time aspect. I think that's what it is. I'm not sure what's happening for other people, but where big repair shops are operating, where there might be 2 or 3 or 10 technicians, and the jobs get doled out by the boss every morning, he wants those cameras fixed and back in the basket, ready to send out again promptly. There's just no freedom to spend another day on it, figuring out how something works or sorting things out.
Actually, earlier you were talking about the Ector lens and the Bantam Special. Wasn't that the lens that was also adapted to the Cardon rangefinder?
Yes, I believe it was. I think the optical block is exactly the same, but they are labeled differently. One, I think the Cardon lens is labeled 47 millimeters, but if I recall, the optical blocks are the same or at least very, very similar. Someone was talking about a Cardon that they wanted to pick up, and they only wanted it for the lens. So I can confirm it's a very nice lens, but they are quite pricey.
If I clean the slow speed mechanism, I don't disassemble it, no? I just drop it. I drop it in a liquid.
I just clean them in naphtha, cigarette lighter fluid, and you can do it in a little jar. I mean, I think when I worked at Kodak, we used to have a little film tin. It was one of those film canisters that takes 35mm film, and it just sat on your bench. It had a lid on it, so you didn't drop your cigarette in it. In those days, yeah, everyone smoked in those days. But yeah, you just do it in there and you just get your tweezers and you'd hold the thing down and then you just move the movement backwards and forwards. About 10 times was a good number for self-timers particularly. And then you pull it out, blow the solvent away and lubricate it. Graphite powder was what we tended to use for lubrication.
What kind of lubrication? Sorry?
Graphite powder.
Powder?
Yeah, just powder. And just work it in. And then blow all of it away. Make sure it's absolutely all gone. But don't take a self-timer that you haven't cleaned and put graphite powder in there because it'll clump up in the grease and dirt that's on there. And it'll fall out and it'll end up behind your lens. It always ends up flakes inside your lens. They sparkle really well, pieces of graphite powder, when they're inside your lenses.
Could I use thin oil instead of powder?
Watchmaker's oil.
Okay.
Yeah, in theory, you probably could. Just do the pivots.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that would probably work just as well. But the problem with using oil, generally, watchmakers' oils are better, of course, than most. But otherwise, if you use just your Singer sewing machine oil or whatever you've got lying around, your 3-in-1, it'll go off over time. It just deteriorates. It polymerizes or something. And instead of being a nice fluid, a lubricant, it becomes sticky. And it gathers up dust, so it becomes like a grinding paste. That's the problem with using oil and grease, is it gathers up dust. It's a magnet for dust. It's great probably for stopping dust going other places, but it does become a grinding paste. It's a nuisance. But with camera shutters, they're not like working on watches. When you think about a watch or a clock, the thing's ticking away 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year. It's working all the time. But your camera, I mean, if you put a 36-shot film through it every day, that's only 36 times that the shutter's firing in a day. I mean, they just don't have to move very often, and that's just the way of it. So they don't need to be prepared in the same way that a watch would be for its movement and its gears.
When you were doing the repairs, how like were you working 5 days a week, 7 days a week? Like how busy were you when you were at your busiest?
No, it would have been 5 days a week I was doing it. And then later on, I cut it down to 4 days a week. I mean, you can control things like that to a certain extent, because if you're exceptionally popular with the repair business, you can't be charging enough. So you bump the prices up a bit, and then some of the demand drops off, and then you've got a manageable workload, and you feel much happier for it because you're getting the same money for doing less work. I mean, what can be wrong with that? So yes, I knocked it down to 4 days a week, I suppose, when I was about 65, a couple of years before I retired. I enjoyed that. It was good having a 3-day weekend every week. It was good, yeah. But otherwise, no, I still just work at it. You get up in the morning. Of course, working from home, you haven't got any travel time, so it's fairly convenient. Have a cup of coffee whenever you want.
Do you find that you enjoy cameras more now that you're not doing it as often, like under your own time, or no?
Yeah, I think it's probably pretty much the same. It is much easier now that I don't have to do it for a living. If I'm wanting to make a video about something, well, I might not service the camera in one go over the course of the day and record the lot and then tip it out as half a dozen videos. I might just do half an hour, video it, put it up on YouTube, and then a couple of days later come back and do another half an hour until the job's out the way. I haven't got the same time pressure.
Do you do all the recording and editing yourself, or is there someone that helps you?
Oh, no, I always do that myself. Yeah. That's why I keep it simple.
Very good.
Always the camera in one position, all the gear laid out in the same way. Makes it nice and simple.
I always like hearing the birds in the background of your videos too.
Yeah, they're just out the window. Not today. It's a cold and windy day and all the birds are hiding. But yeah, it's always fun.
Did you ever get to the point where you were close to or actually threw a camera against the wall? It just wasn't working out?
No, I don't think I've ever run into that. You can always pack it in for the day. If things have gone really bad, you just pack it in, put it over in the corner and go and have a beer and come back the next day and start again. I mean, that's the way you have to deal with these things, particularly if it's somebody else's camera. Once you've taken the job on, you've got to see it through, basically, one way or another. I can only think of one camera. There's a bloke in the States. He was a funny sort of a man. He'd never ask. He'd just send me stuff. And he'd send me Retinas and he'd send me Voigtlanders. And one day he sent me this Contiflex Super BC or something, one with the automatic exposure and stuff. And the letter with it explained that he'd had the shutter repaired by someone, but there were parts missing and the automatic didn't work. But he didn't care about the automatic. He just needed it repaired. That drove me nuts. I wasted days and days on that. And in the end, I just emailed him and said, if you'd like it back, I can send it back to you because it's not going. It's not going to go. But I should never have opened it up. I should just have left it alone. He just snuck it by me by sending it without asking first. And that was a problem. I should have learnt by things like that. You don't ask. I would have told him straight out if he'd asked. No, don't service things like that.
I wonder it's the same situation that I know when I know other repair people, what they hate is someone coming with a bag of bits and going, oh, I had a go at this and can you fix it?
Yeah, I don't mind that with Retinas. Nice to get a couple every year at least, jigsaw puzzles I called them. And they'd arrive in a bag, and you'd have to lay them out on the bench and see how many of the pieces were there and work out how many of the screws were missing. But because when I was servicing the cameras, I stripped them right down to the chassis anyway. It didn't matter that they were taken to pieces because I was going to have to do that work anyway. And knowing them as well as I do, it didn't matter that the screws were just loose in the bag because I knew where the screws went. So that wasn't a problem. I quite enjoyed doing those jigsaw puzzles. But yeah, if you gave me a jigsaw puzzle of a camera I've never seen before, that's a different matter. That's much more challenging.
All right. We're at the point where we'll start winding down here. Having Chris, you come on the show, I'm really happy you decided to do it. Like I said, this is a show that's a little bit different than the other podcasts and that we kind of just allow anybody to come on and just talk about anything. And, we really haven't done a lot on the Retinas. I mentioned the one we had done about a year and a half ago. But, I just can say that from the moment I started collecting, my first Retina was a 2A. and I really liked it. It actually took me a while to get used to the bottom winders, but I still have a fondness for that 2A because I never liked the EV coupling system that they put on the later cameras, that little pin that you always have to
Yeah.
hold down if you wanted to separate the shutter speeds and aperture settings. So the 2A still has a softness for me. You had already mentioned the 3S is a favorite of mine, but I think at the very beginning of the show, you said your very first Retina was a 1B. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Because the 1B has a slightly larger viewfinder than the 1A does, but it's
It
scale
certainly does.
yeah, it has a slight, it's not quite as big as the 3Cs, but somewhere in the middle. It's very bright because when you don't have a beam splitter, there's no light reflecting away from your eye. So it's a bright viewfinder. It's otherwise a regular retina. And I find sometimes that I actually shoot faster when I don't have a rangefinder. And I know that that is contrary to a lot of people. They really like the security of being able to see that split image. But if you're shooting outdoors in good light and you trust depth of field, I find that the 1B is probably my favorite user retina just because of how fast it is. And I think they only went with the 2.8 lens on that, so you don't get the extra stop of
Right.
speed. But I almost never shoot my lenses wide open, so the lack of the f2 xenon isn't a big deal for me. But the best thing about the 1Bs is that you pointed this out too, they're not that expensive. They're somewhat affordable. I know, different people's definitions of what's affordable varies, but they're really wonderful cameras and they're pocketable. They give great results.
Yeah, they're a nice wee camera. Yeah, they're good. The 1As are much the same, except you've got to deal with the tiny viewfinder.
The squinty viewfinder, yeah.
Yeah, that's tiny.
Well, that was what I always liked. It's the Kodak 35. Eastman Kodak's US built Kodak, not the rangefinder, the scale focus one, because it has a flip up viewfinder that's
Yeah.
actually quite large for a 1930s camera, and they made them into the 40s, I know. But for that era, if you're shooting scale focus and you get one that's working properly, the viewfinder is quite nice on it. And I don't have a problem shooting scale focus cameras. I find them to be fun and a little bit of a challenge, but not that bad. I'm gonna call on you, Greg. You're here. Greg contacted me. I was selling a Miranda camera on eBay, and he didn't know who I was. Well, he knew about the show, but he didn't realize I was the same person. And I had a Miranda ST for sale, and he sent me a message through eBay saying, "I don't think that's what that is." And I was like, "No, it is." And I explained why. And he's like, "Oh, okay, you're right." And then I ended up selling him the camera anyway. And I'm like, "Hey, you ever hear the Camerosity podcast?" He's like, "Yeah." And like, he's like, I'm already a fan." So I started talking to him, and now he's become a regular on our Discord server. But Greg's a huge fan of the Canon rangefinder cameras, and that's a topic that I'd like to revisit too. We've spoken about Canon rangefinders way back in episode 18 with Peter Kitchenman, and I'm trying to see if I could get him to come on the show and maybe revisit that. So, Greg, do you want to share a recent gas pickup real quick that'll maybe tease a future episode?
Sure. I guess if you're a Canon Barnack rangefinder collector, and I just organized my Barnack drawer last night. There were 52 in it, not including four special ones that sit out in display. But I'd say if you're a Canon Barnack rangefinder collector and you want to share a gas pickup, I would say the Canon non-Hansa Canon original that I just picked up would be the pride of the collection. So I think this one is it's a later one from like maybe 1938, and it's been restored except they left the original leatherette and it's crumbling and I got to sort of glue it back on, but it's beautiful but it's a usable camera, and that's what I love about these things. Is, to me, I hate having a shelf queen. I want a beautiful, cool camera that I can use. And I'm so really happy about this one. I found it for a wonderful price. You know what these things sell for regularly. I got it for a price that was insane, but not as insane as they get. And so I'm very happy about it. But yes, I have that, and I'll talk to you about that a little bit more. I think it'd be wonderful to do another Canon
Yeah.
rangefinder show. I've got a friend that is far more knowledgeable than I am that I'd love to engage in that if we could. And I'll talk to you a little bit about it.
Yeah.
That'd be wonderful.
Great. Okay. And Joao, you had mentioned picking up the Fotelander Superb that you bought from Paul via me. Have you had a chance to shoot it yet?
No, not yet. I had to get around to testing it. The other one that I wanted to quickly share that I picked up is this Ansco Super Speedex. It's a 6
Oh,
by
they're a nice camera.
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't shot it yet, but it seems to be working quite well. So that's sort of my most recent acquisition. And then I connected with Fernando, and I think I sent him on a wild goose chase in Berlin trying to find a camera for me. So we'll see if that materializes or not.
No, I will be very glad to look for it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
But Chris, you're in New Zealand, so we started the show at noon for you. Theo's in Sydney, so he's 2 hours before you. Fernando after. Sorry, yeah, I had it backwards. But Fernando is in the dark zone for right now. It's what, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. there for you?
3:41, yes.
3:41 in the morning. So
yeah, it's a bit early.
We had to adjust our recording time for the last episode to invite more people to be able to join from Europe, that are like the middle of the day for them. But our normal recording time here in the United States works out well for you, being in New Zealand, because it's the middle of the day again, so we kind of have that like time zone little lump there, and that's how we're able to get our Australian and New Zealand friends. I'd love to get more Japanese callers, but I feel like there'd be a language barrier though. So
it's also the middle of the workday, so it'd be very hard to get people to sort of.
That's true.
Yeah. Speaking of, you mentioned gas and pickups and so on a bit earlier. The Sydney camera market was on the other weekend, and it was very nice to see that it was absolutely packed again. So there's a real big interest for cameras again and film photography, albeit the Digicam stall had lots of people queuing up a lot as well. But it was just good to see that. There's lots of Retinas there for sale, as there always is. But I picked up a Rolleiflex Standard, which I was really pleased to pick up, and a couple of Konica rangefinders, and it was just a nice little way to pick up a couple of extra cameras. But I did actually go shooting out with a few friends afterwards, and we all decided we were going to use TLRs, and I actually went out with a Seagull. I can't remember the exact model. I think it's a 4F, something like that. And what really surprised me is the brightness of the viewfinder on this thing. It is actually wonderful TLR to use. I'd never really considered it because we're always considering that the Chinese cameras from that era to be knockoffs or copies and etc. Really beautiful camera to use. What does take you a little bit of getting used to is the actual focusing patch in the middle is a circle, but the actual line that goes across it is diagonal. And I swear the brain just does not click over, especially when you're looking at a reversed image and trying to get that right. I reckon I was the slowest shooter there out of the whole group, just purely trying to focus.
I would like to share also. My pickup is a OM1.
Oh, yes.
21 millimeter.
Oh, okay. Yeah, very
this
nice.
Beautiful lens. It's really nice to shoot with this camera.
That's amazing how tiny that lens is for being 21 millimeter. Usually the 21 millimeter lenses are huge.
Yes, it is not so bulge, no?
Yeah, very nice.
What's the aperture on that one?
3.5.
3.5, yes.
Okay, that's probably helps make it smaller a bit too. Yes. The 2.8s tend to be huge.
The curvature is not so strong. It's very well made. And thank you, Mike, and everybody from Camerosity in English. We are in our fourth chapter, in fourth episode of Camerosity en Español, and we are very happy to keep going. Next one, we will record in Berlin, in the Berlin Photo Trade Show in 2 or 3 weeks.
Very cool.
If you could do any outtakes in English, Fernando, that would be really nice as well to include on here. It's actually amazing. I want to actually listen to the Spanish version, but yeah, and it sounds great, but I have absolutely no idea what anyone's saying. So I'm considering maybe I need to go learn Spanish just so I can listen to Camerosity as well.
Now you can translate with AI.
There you go.
Yeah.
Paul, I'm just wondering if you're going to stock up on Nikon F5s for the store now that the internet's all abuzz about the fact that that's what Artemis is using to take pictures of the moon. Is the D5? Sorry, the D5.
The D5, yeah, it is interesting because they also have the Z's on that.
They have a Z9 on there. I saw.
Right. So I think they went to the D5 because of the 14-24 zoom.
And it was also because they've been using it on the ISS, and they know that it's not negatively impacted by the radiation in space.
Okay, cool. No, I didn't know that. That's cool.
It's also very low noise at high ISO. It's a beautiful camera for literally the dark side of the moon.
So I think you should, bulk up your store, get a couple of D5s in there, be ready for the rush.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I'm going to swear off digital. I'm going to stick with film, I think.
Except the Hasselblad, the digital back,
the Hasselblad.
Right?
That's the best. Honestly, that's the best camera ever made. Is the X2D. So Aaron had, what were you holding up, Aaron? Was it a Flexoret?
No, I think you.
Oh, the Yashica 44. Yeah, no, that's from the Kurt collection.
It is, and I was going down the TLR rabbit hole a little bit. I picked up a Yashica A that came with the box and the Japanese manual and the leather case. It's a gray Yashica A, so it's the two-tone gray, which I don't see a whole lot of. And I took it apart, did a little dusting and cleaning up, and took it out and shot it, and it worked so good. We were going over things. I went through your store, and I found the viewfinder is so perfect on it. It's such a great little camera. I was able to get some film for it. It's the 127. I'm hoping now that Eastman is doing their own film again, that they'll start spooling up 127. I mean, I can cross my fingers and toes and hope that starts happening again, but I bought some extra spools off of eBay. And so I'm really happy with this.
When we were discussing that, because you bought some of the film photography project film that did not have, that didn't have numbers on the back.
Yeah.
Yep.
On the paper. And of course, that uses red windows to advance the film to the next number. So if you don't have numbers, the popular theory was that it was exactly one crank to go from frame 1 to frame 2 and 3 and 4. But then we wondered about how that worked as the film spool got larger. Have you processed anything yet that you?
I haven't processed it yet, but I'm still going through the first roll because it's a little bit of a process to make sure that I'm advancing it correctly. But as I've gone, once I got, so the one is, you can't see the one at all in the film window.
Right.
But when I blew past the one because I didn't know how far to go. I got the 2, it was a little wider. I shot that one, and then you and I were talking, and that's when you said, do one full revolution. And inside the corner of the window, right on the side of it, I could kind of see the 3 is a fat enough digit that I was able to do one full turn, and I saw the 3 come up. So that process of one full crank seems to be the right answer. And I thought, if nothing else, when I get about halfway through the roll, I may do just a little bit extra each time and maybe lose a frame, but at least I won't be overlapping frames that way. Just a thought, but that was great.
Aaron, the model that you have, even though it only says Yashica 44, that's actually called the 44A.
It is, and it's got, and it has, and I don't know if you can.
Oh, it does have an A. Okay, it's on the front there, or the top, I meant. Yep. But the difference for anyone listening, the regular 44 does have an automatic frame spacing. So if you had an actual 44, and I think, if I remember correctly, you can easily spot the difference because the 44 has the Rolly Bay filter mounts, whereas yours has like this push on. So if you're on eBay and you're trying to spot one of these and you can't tell the difference, if it has the Bay filter mount, the bayonet mounts, that's going to be a regular 44, and that is going to have the automatic frame spacing. The 44A was like the lower end model, and it relies on the red window for all the frames. So
Yeah.
if you had the other one, you wouldn't have that problem.
I don't know if you could see, but the window is so far offset that it doesn't register those lines.
Yeah, that would make sense. Well, I hope you get something that works better for you, because those are wonderful cameras.
Oh, it's wonderful. And even if I have to go into a dark room and unwind the film and make some marks so I can see them in the window, I thought about doing that as well, and then rewinding it. It's a little bit of a chore, but I think it would be worth it. Mike, I wasn't trying to poke you with a stick, but I realized after I posted the picture on the Facebook page, I got a new lens for my birthday. A friend sent it to me. I spent last week in Ohio, and one of my old Navy buddies sent me the lens for my F1, my Canon F1, and it's the 55 millimeter 1.2, the chrome nose.
Beautiful.
And it's a glorious, I mean, it is the most, it's in pristine shape. I didn't have this camera. I didn't grab my F1. I put it on an AE1 program.
That is probably my favorite Canon SLR lens right there, that chrome nose 55 1.2.
This looks like it came out of a time capsule, Greg. It is.
That's wonderful.
It's absolutely the most, and it's pristine inside. The view is perfect.
I just found an F1. Actually, a friend found it for me and said, you got to buy this. It was an F1 and the 55 1.2 that the inspection code, date code on the lens are my birth month and year. And I was like, oh, I'm buying that. And so I'm waiting on it to come to me from Japan now. So
I look forward to seeing that. That's awesome. I've been listening to every single episode and I'm most of the way caught up. You guys have all increased my camera collection and opened up my eyes to other things.
And your wallet.
And you know what? I've been buying nice cameras too. I bought a Canon 7, so I'm really looking forward to revisiting that podcast because I've listened to 18, but yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. But thank you everybody for enduring my gas, because I brought a pile of stuff out here on the porch with me.
We do need to wrap things up here. Want to thank everyone who showed up. We had quite a few people drop off, but there's still a decent number of people here. Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show. I hope you enjoyed, the conversation and kind of got a feel for what we do. Yeah, this is our 107th episode. We've been doing this. This was a child of the pandemic. We all got bored one night and just turned it on and started going, and we've really never stopped. So we allow everybody to come on. If you're ever bored and want to join us again, by all means, jump on. You just never know what types of topics we're going to get onto. We cover so many different things. We've done decades shows. We've done brand specific shows, types of camera shows too. We've had, yourself on. Just so many cool people have been able to come on and just talk to us about stuff. And I learn as much as the listeners do too. So thank you for coming.
Yeah, it's been good.
All right. As always, the topics and discussions on the Camerosity podcast are influenced, controlled, and dictated by you guys. We never really know what we're going to talk about. The next couple episodes, we do have some ideas what we're going to talk about. Canon rangefinders will almost certainly be the next one, but we want to revisit a few other things that we covered in some of the earliest episodes, expand on some things we maybe only half covered too. We have some ideas, but by far the best way to get something you want to hear is just to join us and ask. Today is the 6th of April, so that means the next time we record will be Monday, April 27th at the usual time. That's it for tonight. So everybody have a nice rest of your week. Artemis is on its way home, so hopefully they make it the rest of the way safe. So you guys have a good rest of your day.
Good night, everyone.
Take care, guys. Thanks.
Good night.
Bye, everyone. Bye-bye. Steven, do you know there's a cat on your face?
Yes, I do know there is a cat licking my face.
Oh my goodness.
The door in this room doesn't latch as well as the other one, so she pushes her way in.
He's literally getting groomed on camera right now. That is nice. All right.